The dense forest of northern Montana awoke beneath a heavy quilt of dawn mist. Rain had fallen all night, soaking every leaf, stone, and blade of grass. The Clearwater Creek, usually a quiet ribbon winding through the woods, now roared with anger, swollen with muddy water, snapping at its banks like a beast unchained. Miles away from any town, nestled deep within a grove of red and golden maples, sat a modest log cabin. Smoke from the chimney curled into the fog, thin and steady like a watchful sentinel. Inside, Ed and Marlene Walker moved slowly through their morning routine. At 71 and 66, the couple lived a life of peaceful ritual, warm tea, a wood stove fire, and the company of birdsong. But that morning, something shattered the silence. A sound, thin, desperate, almost drowned by the roar of the river, cut through the forest like a cry from another world. Ed had just unfolded his newspaper when his ears caught it. He froze. Marlene, in the kitchen kneading bread dough, looked up. "You heard that?" he asked, voice low, uncertain. Marlene nodded. "Sounded like an animal in trouble." They both stepped outside, drawn not by curiosity, but by something deeper, a tug in the chest. That kind of pull you get when something isn't just wrong, but urgent. The river had carved a new path overnight, surging closer to the cabin than ever before. Trees had toppled into the current, and the usual dirt path to the water's edge was now a slick, unstable slope. Ed held tight to a branch for support, peering through the mist. That's when he saw it. A fawn, no older than a few weeks, was trapped in the icy, thrashing water. Its tiny hooves scrambled against the current, its legs clearly too weak for the fight. Its dark eyes, wide with panic, locked onto Ed's for a fleeting second before it was sucked further downstream. Ed's heart sank. He had seen wild births and wild deaths in these woods, but this was different. This wasn't nature taking its course. It was nature spiraling out of control. And then he saw something else. At the edge of the trees, barely visible through the fog, stood a figure, low to the ground, muscular, eyes glowing amber. A bobcat. Ed's breath caught in his throat. The animal's coat was ragged, her ears notched from past battles. A long, jagged scar ran from her left eye down to her cheek. She was old, but not weak. The way she watched the river, her body tensed like a bowstring, told Ed she wasn't there by accident. Bobcats were predators, silent, swift, lethal. A drowning fawn would be an easy meal, but something about the way she moved, it wasn't quite predatory. She didn't slink. She didn't crouch. She stood still, head tilted slightly as if weighing a decision. Marlene stepped beside Ed, clutching his hand. "Don't move," she whispered. "Just watch." In the storm-racked wild, everything runs by instinct. Predator, prey, fight, flight. And yet, in that breathless moment, something else flickered to life. Something rarer than lightning in a snowstorm. The bobcat leapt, straight into the river, not toward the fawn as a hunter, but behind it, paddling against the current. Her paws sliced the water, powerful yet precise. Her muscles strained. The cold would kill her just as quickly as the deer, and yet she pressed on. Ed and Marlene could only watch, stunned. Whatever story was being written that morning, it was not the one they expected. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. The sight before Owen and Lily had all the makings of a primal tragedy. The fawn, its delicate legs thrashing in the swollen river, was only moments from surrendering to the merciless current. It cried out again, weaker this time, like a thread of life unraveling with each wave. Owen, rooted to the muddy riverbank, clenched his fists in helpless frustration. He had spent a lifetime in these woods, had hunted and hiked through every inch of their rugged beauty, but nothing had prepared him for this. Then came the impossible. From the tree line emerged a shadow. Not a human rescuer, not another deer, but a bobcat. Her coat was mottled with age, her steps deliberate. One of her ears was torn at the edge, and a long, faded scar cut diagonally across her left eye, like a mark from a battle long past. She was wild, unquestionably so, yet the look in her eyes wasn't that of a predator surveying a meal. It was something else, something Owen could only describe as consideration. Bobcats were reclusive, solitary, and driven by instinct, and a fawn, alone and vulnerable, was exactly the kind of opportunity nature taught them not to ignore. Owen's breath caught in his throat. "She's going to kill it," he muttered under his breath. But Lily didn't answer. She was staring intently, her expression unreadable. She had always seen things in animals that others couldn't. Subtleties, shifts in behavior, things that couldn't be explained by logic. And now she was seeing something no one could explain. The bobcat stood at the edge of the river several seconds. Her tail flicked once, twice, then she leapt. The splash was loud, jarring against the morning's quiet. Water surged around her as she swam into the current, muscles rippling, eyes locked on the fawn. Not to hunt, to save. "She's helping it," Lily whispered, as if saying it aloud might shatter the delicate reality unfolding in front of them. Owen could hardly believe what he was seeing. The bobcat closed the distance with powerful strokes, her movements efficient but strained. The river was no gentle stream. It was ice cold, fast-moving, and cruel. Her fur became waterlogged, clinging to her frame. Several times she was pulled under, but each time she fought her way back up, refusing to give in. When she reached the fawn, there was no pounce, no claws. Instead, she gently gripped the fawn by the nape of the neck, firm enough to hold, soft enough not to hurt. The fawn, whether out of shock or instinct, didn't resist. It simply allowed itself to be guided. Together, the two unlikely companions moved toward the riverbank. Inch by inch, stroke by stroke, the bobcat swam against the current, carrying the fawn toward a shallower bend where the water eased its grip. The effort was monumental. Owen and Lily could only watch, paralyzed by awe. When at last the bobcat hauled herself and the fawn onto the muddy shore, both collapsed. The fawn lay still, chest heaving, too weak to rise. The bobcat stood over it, drenched and shivering, water dripping from her whiskers. And then something extraordinary happened again. The bobcat lowered her head and began to lick the fawn's coat. Long, deliberate strokes, warming it, drying it. The same way a mother cat might care for her own young. Owen and Lily remained frozen on the hillside, hearts pounding. Neither spoke, neither needed to. They had just witnessed a moment so far removed from nature's usual script, it bordered on the miraculous. "She chose compassion over instinct," Lily finally said, her voice trembling. "That's not just rare, that's sacred." And Owen, a man of quiet strength who had seen many things in the wild, death, birth, survival, could only nod, eyes shining. Something had shifted in the forest that morning, something the textbooks couldn't explain. And it all started with a choice made by a scarred, wild bobcat. In the days that followed the river rescue, Owen and Lily couldn't keep their minds off what they had witnessed. Every time they looked out toward the clearing where the forest met the meadow, they half expected the moment to vanish like a dream too beautiful to be real. But it hadn't been a dream. The bobcat had truly saved the fawn, and what came after was something even more difficult to comprehend. The morning after the rescue, Owen ventured out alone, camera in hand, walking the muddy trail that led to the edge of the pines. He wasn't sure what he hoped to find, perhaps tracks, a tuft of fur, anything to prove it hadn't all been a fluke of imagination. What he found instead took his breath away. There, curled beneath the sheltering roots of a toppled cedar, lay the bobcat and the fawn, not apart, together. The fawn, still weak but recovering, lay with its long legs folded beneath it, its head resting gently against the bobcat's flank. And the bobcat, ever alert, was grooming the fawn, her rasping tongue moving slowly across its spotted coat, untangling burrs and drying the soft fur. She paused only to glance at Owen through the trees, her yellow eyes calm, almost unbothered by his presence. Then she returned to her careful task. Owen didn't raise his camera. He couldn't. It felt like a violation, as if to capture the moment might break its fragile spell. Instead, he slowly backed away, heart pounding with something that felt like reverence. Back at the cabin, he tried to explain it to Lily, but words fell short. So, the next morning, they both went out together, more carefully this time, staying low, silent, hidden among the shadows. Again, the scene repeated itself. The two animals were inseparable. Days passed, and the bond between them only deepened. The bobcat brought the fawn bits of dried leaves, showing it how to nibble. She licked its legs when it trembled from the cold. At night, they lay close for warmth beneath the low-hanging boughs. There was no hesitation in the fawn anymore, no fear, only trust. "She's not just protecting it, Lily whispered one afternoon, binoculars pressed to her eyes. "She's raising it." It was unthinkable. A predator nursing a prey animal. A solitary creature of the wild, taking on the role of a mother to one that should have fled from her at first sight. Yet, here they were, rewriting every natural law Owen and Lily had ever known. One afternoon, the fawn wandered a little farther into the clearing, testing its legs. The bobcat followed at a distance, tail swishing, watchful. When a hawk screeched overhead, the fawn froze. Immediately, the bobcat was at its side, standing taller, staring up at the sky, making herself visible to the threat. The hawk circled once and moved on. She wasn't just caring for it, she was defending it. Maybe she lost her own litter, Lily guessed one evening, staring into the fireplace. Maybe this fawn filled that space. Owen nodded slowly. Or maybe she just knew it needed her. By the end of the second week, the bobcat and fawn had created something that defied instinct, biology, everything written in books. But in its place was something undeniable. A bond born not of blood, but of choice. A bond that didn't need explanation. It simply existed, pure, wild, and deeply moving. And in the quiet moments between dawn and dusk, when the forest hushed and the world felt still, Owen and Lily sat on their porch and watched the miracle unfold. By the third week, it was no longer a question of whether the bond between the bobcat and the fawn was real. It was part of the daily rhythm of the forest now, a strange, beautiful anomaly nestled in the shadow of Owen and Lily's cabin. The forest around them seemed to grow quieter, more reverent, as if nature itself was holding its breath in awe of what had taken root. The predator and prey, who should have feared each other now, moved through the woods as a pair, side by side. And soon, Owen and Lily realized that their old wooden cabin, built decades ago with rough pine logs and weathered windows, was becoming more than a quiet retreat for two aging souls. It was becoming a haven for something much larger. The bobcat and fawn didn't avoid the cabin anymore. They began to spend time just beyond the clearing, close enough for the couple to see clearly through binoculars, and sometimes even with the naked eye. The bobcat always maintained a respectful distance, watching Owen and Lily with those deep, measured eyes, but the fear had gone, and the fawn, growing stronger with each passing day, became more curious, occasionally wandering closer to the porch steps when the wind was still and the air held no scent of threat. It was Lily who first decided to leave something out for them. Not food, not at first. Just a folded wool blanket tucked beneath a cedar tree not far from the shed. She left it there in silence, with no expectations. The next morning, it was pressed down with small hoof prints and claw marks. They had slept there. Something shifted in Owen and Lily after that. Without planning it, they began preparing the shed like a nursery. They lined it with straw, left shallow bowls of clean water tucked discreetly at the edge. Owen reinforced the shed's door with a small gap left open, enough to allow the bobcat or the fawn to enter freely. There were no fences, no cages, no traps, just space, warmth, and safety. And the animals responded. At night, the fawn often curled up in the shed, the bobcat lying at the entrance like a sentry, her ears twitching at every sound. During the day, the two would roam, grazing, climbing, napping, and then return before sunset to rest near the humans who had come to accept them as part of the landscape. One crisp morning, Lily was preparing tea when she glanced out the kitchen window and saw the bobcat sunbathing on the flat rock beside the shed, her eyes half-lidded, her scar catching the golden light. A few feet away, the fawn picked at the tender shoots of early spring grass. It was such a domestic image, so impossibly normal, that Lily forgot to breathe for a moment. "They've made this place their home," she whispered when Owen joined her at the window. He nodded. "And we've become their neighbors." Word of the unusual duo had not spread, at least not beyond the woods. Owen and Lily agreed early on not to involve outsiders. No wildlife officers, no reporters, no curious hikers. What was unfolding here was too rare, too sacred. The fewer eyes on it, the longer it might last. The cabin, once a quiet escape for two retired teachers, had transformed into a silent sanctuary where something ancient and unexplainable was unfolding. It wasn't just shelter for the bobcat and the fawn. It had become a crossroads, a place where instincts softened and love, against all odds, was allowed to bloom. And every evening, as the sun dipped below the Montana hills and cast its last golden light across the trees, Owen and Lily sat on their porch, steaming mugs in hand, and watched the two creatures bed down just yards away. It was a peace they had never expected to find in the wild, and now they couldn't imagine life without it. As spring deepened into early summer, the days grew longer, and the winds carried with them the murmurings of the forest, the distant rustle of branches, the rhythmic tapping of woodpeckers, and something else. A quiet tension. Something was shifting, and Owen and Lily felt it in the stillness between breezes. The animals seemed to feel it too. The fawn, once delicate and unsure, now moved with growing confidence. Its legs had strengthened, its eyes sharpened with curiosity. It began to explore farther into the woods, always under the watchful eye of the bobcat, who trailed close behind like a silent guardian. And yet, there were moments, fleeting but noticeable, when the bobcat paused at the edge of the clearing, her ears perked, as if she'd caught something faint and familiar on the wind. Owen saw it first one morning, the bobcat standing absolutely still, body tense, facing west toward the deeper forest. She stayed like that for several minutes before finally relaxing and returning to the shed, where the fawn lay curled in the shade. "What do you think she heard?" Lily asked as they watched from the porch. Owen sipped his coffee, his eyes narrowed. "I don't know, but something's calling to her." The next few days brought more strange behavior. The bobcat became more alert, more restless. She no longer napped for long, her ears constantly twitching at distant sounds. The fawn, sensing the unease, stayed closer to her side, and the two no longer wandered as freely. The peaceful rhythm they had fallen into now felt tentative. Then, just after dawn one morning, it happened. A distant cry rang out through the trees, sharp, aching, unmistakable. It wasn't the call of a bobcat or a coyote. It was the cry of a doe, soft, high-pitched, and desperate. A mother searching. The fawn bolted upright in the shed, eyes wide, ears straining toward the sound. Its legs trembled, not with fear, but recognition. The cry came again. The fawn took an uncertain step forward. Owen and Lily had stepped outside, frozen in place. The bobcat, who had been sitting in the clearing, turned her head toward the forest. Her tail flicked once. Her eyes, those deep golden eyes, were unreadable. She stood slowly and padded toward the shed. What happened next unfolded in a silence thick with emotion. The bobcat stood beside the fawn, close enough to touch, but said nothing. She did not nudge or hiss or protest. She merely looked at the fawn, long and deep, as if asking, "Are you ready?" The fawn looked back, then turned toward the woods. The bobcat walked beside it, not leading, not following, just with it. Owen and Lily trailed at a distance, hearts heavy with anticipation. They knew, even before they saw her, what was coming. And then, there she was. At the edge of a small sunlit meadow, standing as still as stone, was a mature doe. Her coat was rough from a hard winter, her ribs visible beneath her fur, but her eyes were alive and locked on the fawn. The fawn stopped, its breath caught. The bobcat did not move. No one did. Then something ancient stirred, a bond older than any logic, deeper than memory. The fawn took a step, then another. The doe moved too, slowly at first, and then, like a dam breaking, they ran to each other. They met in the middle of the clearing, touching noses, trembling with recognition. The doe licked the fawn's face, over and over, in frantic relief. The fawn pressed against her chest, crying in tiny, broken bleats. Owen heard Lily sniffle beside him. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The bobcat turned away. She gave the pair a final glance. No resentment, no confusion. Just resignation. A silent farewell. Then, like a ghost at peace, she padded into the woods. Back at the cabin, the clearing felt empty without the sound of two mismatched footsteps in the underbrush. Yet Owen and Lily knew, deeply certainly, that this story wasn't ending. It was changing. The forest felt quieter after that morning, not in sound, but in spirit. Owen and Lily still walked the same trails each evening, still paused at the edge of the old shed out of habit. But the rhythmic clack of hooves and paws, the oddity of a bobcat and fawn walking side by side, that was gone. And in its absence, something else remained, a quiet gratitude. Days passed, then weeks. The fawn and its mother were never seen again, though sometimes Lily swore she heard soft hoofbeats far off in the valley, or glimpsed the flick of a white tail through the underbrush. She always smiled when she did. "She's safe," she'd whisper to Owen. "She's where she belongs." But it wasn't the fawn they missed most. It was her, the bobcat. For a time, she vanished completely, not even showing up at the usual spot near the shed, where Owen had continued leaving out a little meat each evening. The meat remained untouched for nearly 2 weeks, until one misty morning in early June. Owen, stepping outside with a mug of coffee in hand, froze. There she was, leaner now, with a small scar over one eye, but unmistakably her. The bobcat was sitting near the tree line, not approaching, just watching, her yellow eyes calm. She stayed for less than a minute before slipping silently into the undergrowth. After that, she began visiting every few days, always at dawn or dusk, always briefly. She never approached Owen or Lily, never entered the shed again. She would eat what was left and then disappear, like a memory that refuses to be forgotten. "She looks older," Lily said one evening as they watched her through the kitchen window. "Not in body, in spirit." Owen nodded. "Like someone who's lived through something rare." Then came autumn again, the 1-year mark since that impossible rescue by the river. The leaves had turned to fire and gold, and the forest was alive with movement. Owen and Lily were sipping cider on the porch, wrapped in wool blankets, when they heard something in the distance. Rustling, then steps, and then 3 shadows emerged from the woods. First, a doe, older now, with the same quiet dignity she had shown that morning in the meadow. Beside her, a younger deer, graceful, sure-footed, and unmistakable. The fawn, now nearly grown, strong, tall, and still with that curious tilt of the head she always had when looking at something new. And a few paces behind them, the bobcat. Lily gasped, tears springing to her eyes before she could stop them. The 3 stood at the edge of the clearing, not entering, just watching. A silent reunion. The young deer looked at Owen and Lily, her gaze soft and lingering. Then she stepped forward, just 1 pace, before turning back toward the trees. The bobcat didn't move. She stood like a statue, golden eyes unreadable, tail flicking once in the cool air. Then, just as silently as they had come, the 3 turned and slipped back into the forest, swallowed by leaves and light. Lily didn't speak for a long time. She didn't need to. Owen placed a hand on hers and whispered, "We didn't just witness survival. We witnessed love." Because they both knew. Wild animals don't behave like that. A predator doesn't raise prey. A deer doesn't return with a bobcat. These were things that shouldn't have happened, but they did. And in that wild corner of Montana, during one impossible autumn, something had shifted, just slightly, in the ancient laws of nature. For a moment, they bent. For love, for compassion, for a bond that neither instinct nor reason could explain. And though the bobcat had long returned to her solitary ways, Owen and Lily would always remember her not as a predator, not as a wild thing, but as something more, a mother, a guardian, a miracle.